Hi, everybody. I'm Laura Lindroth, the Director of Programming and Community Engagement at Rainbows for All Children. Today's training is on the assessments. These are the, pre and post-test surveys that are administered to the facilitator, the participants, and then an optional one for parents or caregivers, okay? So bear with me for a second. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you, and then we can talk a little bit more about the assessments. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do to access the assessments is you're going to log in to your facilitator dashboard. Again, that's facilitator.rainbows.org. Your email is your username generally. Your password is whatever you have set it to, but initially we set everybody up with Rainbows with a capital R 18 exclamation. Log in. Now, one of the things that's really important with the assessments is that you will have to complete certain steps in the process to get this set up. You have to be up to date and current on your certification, on your Rainbows online training. So if you have not completed the training or due for some piece of that or something like that, if there's some reason that you are not able to show that you're completed on your training, then you will need to do that prior to doing any assessments. You won't be able to do it otherwise. And there is no workaround for this one, so I'm very sorry, but you do have to complete that training. As far as the pre and post-test survey assessments, and we call them assessments, by the way, because the term evaluation has all kinds of connotations in schools where you have to get special permission to administer an evaluation of a student versus an assessment of a program. So I know that's kind of strange, but it's just one of those things. So we call them assessments. And this is really, really important for us because it shows the program impact. And it shows to our donors, to the people that we're applying for grants, for funding, that this is an effective program. And more places are requiring evidence to show that a program actually works. We have 36 years worth of evidence that our program is effective, and that is phenomenal for us. So it's why we're able to continue to keep offering this and continue to get funding for it and all of that sort of thing. So these assessments are very, very important. We require facilitators to do the pre and post-test survey assessments of just one group each year, okay? Just one group. If you run 2 groups in the fall and 2 groups in the spring, you only have to pick one of those 4. If you want to do all 4, we would love it. The more data we can get, the better. But if you just do one, that is perfectly acceptable. But please, please do the data assessments. I know it's one extra thing, it's one extra step, it's a burden, I get it. But it is really, really important for us. And I'll show you why in a little bit. I'll show you some of those statistics. But basically, it's how we are able to adjust things and make changes as needed, make sure that we're keeping up with best practices. If it shows over and over again that children are not getting the stress management tools, we need to do something about that, obviously, because that's one of the biggest components of this is to reduce stress. So if it's not doing that, we need to change. So we have to have that data to be able to do that. Okay, off the soapbox, I'm going to show you where it is now. So once again, you will need to be able to see all of these things. So you have to do this after you've completed your certification. Okay, so ideally the pre-tests should be administered in that first meeting or at least by the second meeting. If the first meeting you're a little overwhelmed because there's a parent info session and you have the kids are just getting to know each other and there's icebreakers and all that kind of thing. If you're a little overwhelmed doing it in the first meeting, I understand. But please try to aim for doing it by the second meeting because otherwise it's not data from before they received Rainbows, right? So it's really important to try to do that beforehand. Okay, and then the very last, the post-test should be toward the last meeting, obviously. If it works to do it at the Celebrate Me Day, that's okay. That's usually a little bit more of a fun party atmosphere, so it may not fit with what you're trying to do, but it's up to you. But at least doing it at that last meeting or the meeting before the last meeting, number 11 or number 12, it depends on how, people adjust the number of meetings sometimes, but that last meeting for you. Okay. All right, so you're going to go in, your home page will pop up with your profile. Obviously, you need to complete your profile. You should have completed your site profile. That's another really important piece. And remember, it's the lead facilitator at your site who does that. Yours will not look like this. This is an admin view, so it's going to pop up with everybody's site on here. Yours will just have your site. And if you don't have anything up here, you need to add a site. The lead facilitator at your group needs to add a site and then add each person in there. There's a separate training on that, so I'm not going to go into that today. But you would go to your site and you would click on which one it is. So I'm going to look for rainbows because we're in the rainbows site. So let's just do, oops, somebody else called it rainbows. Perfectly fine. Call it whatever you want. But Rainbows for All Children's is here, okay, in Evanston. So you would click on your site and make sure that all that information is correct. So you can see here that there's different people added to that, etc. Okay. Then what you want to do is go to My Groups. Now this is, each facilitator is going to have their own place to put My Groups. That's your groups. You as the facilitator run 2 groups a semester or 1 group a semester or whatever you do. Those are your groups, okay? So the first time you come in, you're going to hit New Group. You're going to title it, and let's say, it's up to you what you want to call it, but if you have multiple people at your site, especially schools that run like say 10 groups or something and have 10 facilitators doing it, just something that's going to make it easy for you to recognize that this is your group. Or if you are somebody that runs multiple groups, to be able to quickly distinguish, oh, this is my 6th grade group, this is my 8th grade group, whatever it is. So let's say I run, I'm at a middle school and I run a 6th grade group, and then I also run one for 7th and 8th graders. So I'm going to call this one the 7-8, Laura, and I'm going to call it the name of the school. So I don't want to call it Rainbows, but let's say the EPL, that's the Evanston Public Library. Okay, so I run this, and it's this totally up to you what you want to call it. I don't care. That doesn't matter to us at all. It's just to be able to distinguish it for you. Then you're going to select your site. For us, it's going to be the Rainbows. This, again, will not pop up with all of these. It's going to be just the ones that you have entered as connections to what your site will pop up there. So don't get confused by that. If you have co-facilitators, if you have more than one facilitator running that group, you'll want to add your co-facilitator. So Paula and I run this group together, let's just say. So one is going to take the lead and the other is going to be the co-facilitator. Doesn't matter, you can just, or you can put both of you as the lead facilitator, but it's a little easier to have one and one. So, maybe you have 3 facilitators, you can add all 3. Whoever it is that's running this particular group. Then you're going to put your start date in and your end date. So let's say this one starts tomorrow and it ends December 10th. So we run on Tuesdays from September to December. How often does it meet? It meets weekly. Most of you will select weekly. It's going to just depend, again, on what your site does. Maybe you do twice a week. Maybe, hopefully you don't do every other week, because that's a little tricky for kids to wait that long in between. But in any case, whatever you meet. This one meets on Tuesdays. Was that clicked or not? Okay, Tuesdays. And for 7th and 8th, that is Rainbows Level 4. Maybe I have a group that's not quite as mature. It's mostly young 7th graders, so maybe I want to run Rainbows Level 3. Maybe I'm going to do a little bit of both. So I'm going to put both of them in there. That's perfectly fine. Whatever you put is fine. This part here, what you would like potential participants to know about your group, The only place that this is going to pop up is, I'll show you in a minute, but there's a link that you can send to participants to fill out their own information. This would obviously apply for older children and teens. So if they're maybe 12 and up or something, if they have their own email generally, then they can probably be sent this. And again, it's up to you whether you want to have them do it or you want to do it, administer it in the meeting, whatever you're comfortable with. Sometimes it's hard to get them to respond back, but some people don't want to use the meeting time to do this and want to do it outside of that. That's fine. Just make sure that you set a deadline for when you want to receive that back so that they know, it's supposed to be completed before the second meeting, and then you can use that second meeting to remind them, did you all complete your stuff? Did you get it in, etc. Anyway, so if there's something on here that you want them to read, deadline to receive this pre-test is September, what would that be? So the 17th would be the second meeting. So September 16th, please make sure I have your responses by September 16th. I don't know, something like that. This is an optional box. So most people will leave that blank. Okay, so you get to, this is what it is going to look like once you have that group set up. Okay, so it shows you the level, it shows you when you meet, it shows the facilitators, etc. This is what I was talking about where they can register themselves. So if you click on this and you copy and paste it into an email, you could potentially send that out to each participant and say, please complete your information before the next meeting or something like that. And this is just going to be demographic kinds of information. This is not the actual pre-test yet. I'll show you how you send that separately. This is just their demographic information, okay? So if you were to copy and paste that into an email, it's going to come up like this. Oops, I think I just hit something. Okay. It's going to come up like this, and they're going to have the ability to then fill out this information themselves. Okay, this is how it's going to appear for them, and they fill this out. But we are going to just act like we don't, let's say we have younger kids, even though this is 7th and 8th, maybe we don't feel comfortable or our school doesn't want us doing it that way or something like that. So if you're doing it yourself, you're going to say add participant, okay? So we have participant 1, and please only use first names. The only reason we even ask for a name is so that we can match up the pre-test and post-test. So we can say, oh, this is Catherine's and there's Catherine's post-test. That's it, okay? So let's say Catherine. Actually, I have to spell it like my sister does. So. Special Catherine. Okay. And this is 7th and 8th grade. So I'm going to say this person is 13 and is in 8th grade. She's a female. She is Hispanic or Latino. Okay, this is her first time in the group. So yes. And I'm not sure if Catherine is on free or reduced lunch. Now, we get a lot of objections to this question. We get it. I understand that that's a sensitive issue. Also in the optional parent assessment, it does ask about their income range. Again, sensitive subject. I know the reason for this is solely because we are able to get better grant funding if we can say we have X number of below poverty level, or those on free and reduced lunch, those Title I schools, et cetera, et cetera. We get more funding for that, and we're able to pass it on to you all as scholarships and things like that. That's how we're able to offer those discounts and group discounts and reduced fees for Title I schools. All of that is because of this. So we're not trying to dig into people's sensitive subjects. It's just for that. If they really do not want to respond to this, they can say, I prefer not to respond, or you can say, I don't know, because you don't know whether or not that person has it. You may know, or you may not. If you can answer it, and if they're okay with that, it would be great. If not, it's fine to say, I don't know, or whatever. And then this is important too. Again, we just want to be able to measure how many people are coming in for what things. We've noticed that, for instance, we're not getting a lot of participants coming in for an incarcerated parent or sibling. And that's actually unusual because we know that the statistics show that it's not that case. So we're trying to actually target places to be able to say, let's get kids in here that are dealing with that particular issue and find out why they aren't coming. So again, it's just for data purposes. So let's say Catherine's going through her parents' divorce or separation. And I apologize, we have since changed the language from loved one to family member because unfortunately, sometimes the loss that a child is dealing with is not a loved one. It may be somebody that they didn't particularly love all that much. Maybe dad walked out on the family and abandoned them. And so he's not exactly a loved one right now, but he is a family member. It's still a loss. It's still dad, and it still hurts. So that's just one example, but there's many, many. And so we don't always, we've changed our terminology, but unfortunately we can't change it here without making major changes to all of this. And so it still says loved one. So sorry about that. Ignore that, but the loss part is what's important. And then you'll go in and do that for each of the people who are in your group. So let's say you have another one that's a little boy and his name is Jose. He is 12. He's in 7th grade, male. It's also Hispanic. And he's actually been in the group before. He was in it in 6th grade. And he is not on reduced lunch. And he's dealing with the death of his mom. Okay. So as you can see, you just keep adding those until you have all of the participants, who are in your group. Once you have all of those, then the next thing is to click on each of those. Now, this is something that's kind of nice because you can do all this demographic stuff prior to that first or second meeting. If you have all the registration forms, like, okay, tomorrow I'm so excited. I'm going to start my Rainbows group and I have 4 people who are coming. I've already gotten their registration forms. I know who they are. I could go ahead and put all this information in ahead of time. So it's done, it's ready to go. I don't have to worry about it later, okay? So try to do this as much as you can early on, and then you don't have as much to put in later for the pretest. So when you go to do the pretest stuff, you're gonna put in you're gonna click on Catherine. So this is your participant, Catherine. Now all of her assessments are here. So, for instance, as I said before, the parent or guardian pre- and post-test assessments are optional because we know that especially in high school levels, they may not tell their parents they're in a Rainbows or Spectrum group. Even middle schoolers may not do that, and we don't require it. Your site can determine whether or not there needs to be parent consent on going into a Rainbows group or not. But in any case, the parent or guardian may not be all that excited about the fact that they're in Rainbows. Or they may just not want to do a survey. There's a million reasons why or why not to do the parent survey. But if you have parents that are willing to do it and are able to, again, it's great for us to be able to see, is the parent able to see change in their child? What suggestions did they have? Did they get everything that they needed? Did they feel like there wasn't enough communication? Did they get the materials? Did they like the materials? All that kind of thing is really helpful for us to be able to determine changes that need to be made. So the easiest thing with the parent assessment is just to send them this link. And again, you can say, please have this completed by XYZ date, okay? So you just, again, click and put it, copy and paste it into an email. Okay, so that is the parent assessment, but generally you're gonna have just the participant and the facilitator pre-test here. And if you have a parent, if you want to give the parent the pre-test as a PDF and have them complete it and turn it back into you because maybe your parents don't have email or whatever else, you don't have their email address. If you want to give them a paper copy, there is that, and I can show you where that is. But that's where you would add in their information here. You would just click on that and complete that. But let's say we're doing the participants pretest. So the first thing that you're going to do in order to get this data, all this data, is you're either going to have the children complete the pretest on the computer. So you would get Catherine, you would get her all set up, you would click on Catherine, you would click on pretest, and you would have her sit at the computer and complete her pretest right here, like this. That is not going to be feasible for most people, but some have the ability. I know, as I said, I think in a different training, my kids have iPads that are in middle school, and the high schooler has a computer as part of their assignment. They all walk around with these little iPads and computers all day long. So if they have that and they want to bust it out and, do it right there, you would get them to this page and have them complete it. Otherwise, there is a paper version of this. So this is a Likert scale, strongly disagree to strongly agree, and they're just going to answer these questions to the best of their ability. With the younger children, I would encourage you to go through the questions with them and have them complete it as a group. You don't want to steer them toward a particular answer, but you certainly can explain a question. I'll say, for instance, this very first question, unfortunately, is a little bit weird sounding sometimes. I try to get all the facts before attempting to solve a problem. This is actually a question that helps us determine problem-solving abilities, but it's kind of an odd wording, and they don't always understand what that means. But it's basically asking, like, do you analyze the situation before you complete or try to solve the problem? So do you kind of think about all of it, or do you just jump in head first and go, I don't know, or do you just give up? You go, I can't even do it, and I don't even want to bother. So maybe they say disagree. No, I don't do that. I seek out help when I need it. No, I'm somebody that always does things myself. I can't stand asking for help, whatever it is. So they're going to go through all these different questions, right? It will trigger, you won't be able to submit this unless all the questions are answered. So they can't skip a question. They need to answer every single one. It'll prompt them if they don't. So it's kind of nice. So hopefully they'll, remember to actually answer all of these. Now, the middle school and up, so starting in 7th grade, there are questions that relate to destructive behaviors. So please don't be offended by this. Don't, just explain to the students, probably most of this won't apply to any of you, but if it happens to, please answer honestly. No one is going to look at this other than the people at Rainbow's headquarters. You're not going to get in trouble for it or whatever else, but just to let them know, we're just really trying to understand what are some of the behaviors that happen to children when they're dealing with adversity. So, using illegal drugs, abusing prescription medication, drinking alcohol, getting involved in a gang, and getting in a fight. And the fight one is pretty common. And then this is just 12th graders, and that's only because the 7th through 12th grade all have the same assessment. So I apologize that even though this is for 7th and 8th graders, this question will just come up, but it says again here, 12th graders only. Do you expect to graduate? And again, that's just for us to understand graduation rates and that sort of thing. Encourage them, especially on the post tests, to fill out anything that they suggest. I really liked meeting 3, but I didn't like meeting 5. And, I didn't like this activity, or singing was kind of weird for me. I loved my facilitator. She was great because of this and this, or, whatever it is. Anything they want to put on there is fine. Now, if they do not have the ability to do this on a computer, you're going to have them do it on paper. And where you go is this resources page. That's kind of where all your stuff is. It says, again, here, a reminder, how important the pre and post test assessments are, et cetera, et cetera. It has some instructions here as well of how you fill this out. Please bear in mind that everything has to end up on the computer by the end. So if you administer a paper copy, you're going to need to input that data into the computer. We unfortunately, with 2 full-time and 2 part-time people, just don't have the ability to get thousands of assessments in and enter all that data ourselves. We're relying on you to do that. Okay, all the assessment materials are here. The assessment instructions is really helpful, and they are the same for all the levels. So if you just print one of these or download it, you don't have to print all three. They don't differ in any way other than the fact that we just tried to make it easy to put them in each of the sections so people could find them. So we're in Rainbow's level 4, right? So we're going to look at the assessment instructions, but what we're going to right here is the pre-test, okay? So you're going to pull that up. And again, if you've already completed their demographic information, you don't need this first page. You don't need part of the second page either, but you'll have to print that out nevertheless. But this first page is just those demographic information pieces. So you can wait and not fill that out if you don't know those ahead of time, or you want to just do it all at one time. You can just print this off and have them complete the whole thing. And that's really easy. You don't have to worry about it. Put it all in later. And again, the wording on here, someone I love, and it's not necessarily someone I love. So we have changed that, but it's going to take some time for us to do all the assessments again. Okay, what's important is this Likert scale of all the questions. So you have them complete those questions, fill out the bubbles, etc. It doesn't matter if it's pen or pencil because you're going to be inputting it in the computer. And it's exactly the same as what you saw on the computer there. Okay, so that's the pre-test there. So once they've completed that paper copy, you then go back in here and enter it in. Now, it does not have to be entered in at the first or second meeting. If you if you administer the paper copies to your participants in your group at that first or second meeting, you can go enter it in maybe like the 6th meeting, or, you know, whatever, like midway through the semester when things slow down a little bit. I know the beginning of the year can be tricky for a lot of places. Everybody's getting busy and schedules are all over the place and whatever. Just hold on to those because they've completed them. Their knowledge and their information is what's important being at that time. So, you know, it's not important that you enter it into the computer at that time. That being said, if you can complete the pre and post test stuff, at least by the end of the semester, we would like to have the data, you know, as soon as possible toward the end of that. But I'll be honest, we don't assess the data. We don't analyze the data until the summer. So again, you can take your time on getting that in there. Just make sure that you have everything, you don't lose anything, whatever. Another really important piece is that every child or parent or facilitator that does a pre-test needs to also do a post-test. Now, I know that can get tricky because sometimes there are participants that drop out, some join late. I understand that, and we get that that doesn't, you know, that there are things where it doesn't always occur. But I will tell you, if we don't have pre and post tests for that person, we have to throw it away. That data is useless. We can't just use a pre-test or just use a post-test. It would have to be thrown away. So rather than waste your time, if you can make sure that those are done. If you have somebody join late, let's say there is a child that enters at group meeting 3, that's their first meeting. Have them do the pre-test at that meeting. For them, it's still the first meeting. It's still that, you know, initial, this is me before Rainbows. Same thing if you have somebody drop out a little bit early, they say, I'm not going to be able to make the last meeting. At that 11th meeting, then have them complete that post-test if it's at all possible, okay? The other thing I wanted to mention with that is because I brought up letting children into groups, just an overall general kind of thing. Be careful of letting people in, you know, in and out of groups. For some sites, and we have a handful around the country that allow children to enter at any time. They run the program as a year-long program. So they just basically keep cycling the 12 sessions over and over again. Whatever session that child enters is no big deal. They come in at meeting 5 and then they kind of pick up from there and go through until meeting 12 or until they need it. But they run it a little bit differently and have worked with us on how they do it exactly, so that they're still getting all the information. Generally speaking, most sites, it's going to run best and you're going to have the most effective group if you do not allow participants to come and go and come and go, to make the commitment to say, you know, I'm going to be there for at least 10 of the 12 meetings or something like that. Partly because a lot of what makes the group successful is the bonding that occurs, the trust that's built up between participants, all of those kinds of things. And if kids are moving in and out and in and out all the time, they just don't get that. You know, that Susie shows up to meeting 4 and she hasn't been there since, you know, at all. People are going to go, well, who's this person? You know, I don't know if I want to share because she is kind of, she might say something. I don't know if she heard about the confidentiality thing because we talked about that in the first meeting, you know, just little things like that. Okay. So I just want to mention that since I brought it up. All right. So then you've got this new participants information in here. Let's just quickly fill that out so that you can, oops, this is Catherine. Oh, I think I actually, this is the new participant. Okay, so I'm sorry, I'm gonna go back to my group. This is how you're gonna go in the second time if you're like, where is my group? What did I call it? I called it Laura. Here, 7-8 Laura EPL. Again, you won't have to scroll through like that. I have everybody's site on there, so ignore that. Okay, so if you filled out the paper one, you are going to go in later and fill out this pretest for Catherine. Okay, so you're going to put in the answers that she responded with on her paper and hit create. And that's going to pop up with Catherine's information. The next time that you go in on Catherine's page, this is Catherine from your group, 7-8 group, this will actually be add participant post test. After you've already added the pretest, it'll pop up with post test. You won't be able to see that until that pretest is in there. And again, that's going to also prohibit you from just entering a post test for a participant. It does say on the parent pretest, if at all possible, have the same parent complete both. Sometimes one parent will complete one and one will complete the other, and that kind of doesn't make sense because we aren't really looking at somebody's assessment of the program from their eyes, their perspective. So again, that's in the instructions. The facilitator test is really easy. So the first time you're going to answer. Okay, so there's another option on here. If you have done the paper version with all your participants, let's say you have 5 kids in your group, and you get back those 5 pretests from them, rather than going into each individual participant, if we go back to my group, rather than going in here and saying, okay, I'm going to enter Catherine's information on her pretest, you can do an all group pretest, which basically just means you're adding every single participant at one time. So as you can see here, it has Catherine and then her information there that you would enter. And then there's Jose's information. So we would put Jose's down at the bottom there. Okay, and then if you have 3 other people, because I said there were 5 in this group, it would scroll down and you would add those. So it's just a little bit easier. The only question for the facilitator on the pretest is this: what meeting did your participants complete their pretests? Oh, ours did it at meeting 1. So you're going to fill that out. So if you were to just add them individually, then so here is where you would do that. So then the only question that you're going to answer for this is, what meeting did you do? Okay, and that's how that's going to come up. So as you can see then, now that I've done the pretest, there's the pretest for the facilitator. It had that one question. Then you can add the post test. For the post test, it's a little bit longer on the facilitator assessment. Were there any other additional life-altering experiences that came up that you found out, oh, so-and-so not only lost the parent to death, we found out that mom is dealing with some substance abuse issues at the same time. So yes, and then you can explain what that is. And you can write a whole paragraph in there if you want to. Or you're not sure. There seemed to be some things, but you weren't sure, okay? Or yes or no. What supplemental materials did you use? Did you use any of the journals or activity books, whatever you want to call them? Did you use any of the games? Did you do the alternate activities from the resource center, your own alternative activities, anything else that you might have used? Again, this is really helpful for us to determine how much is our stuff being used. When did they complete their post-test? And this is that same question as the pre-test, but just what meeting did they do? Oh, they did it at meeting 12. And then you're going to do some observational data, and that's it. Just did they generally listen attentively at most sessions? Did they complete their activities, et cetera, et cetera? And then you have the option here to answer or put in here any other things that maybe would be helpful. You wish that they did this, you wish that headquarters would provide these materials, or, ooh, I really don't like the way that this particular thing is, or whatever. If you have positive or negative things to say, you can say it here. What was your experience like? Oh my gosh, this was so fulfilling. It did XYZ for me, etc. If you are at a faith-based organization, you happen to run this as a religious group, if you can put that here, and then it's going to ask you what specifically you do. As much detail as you can give us, that would be great, but we don't need like the exact prayer you used or something like that, but just generally what you did. And again, here it gives you the option to do all of them as a group, so you can fill it all out at one time. Okay. So that is that. And then again, if you want to do the parent one, you can send them the pre-test. Once those pre-tests are in, it's going to pop up with the post-test. Again, you can send them the link, but the parent and pre and post are optional. If you need to edit any of this information at any time, Catherine, you wrote down that she's 14, she's actually 15, or something like that. I don't know, 15 would be a lot for an 8th grader. Once again, this is where you find the pre and post-test assessment materials, is in the resources page. And they are all here. And you can send the parent guardian one as an actual downloadable PDF that they can print off themselves and turn in. You can print it and give it to them in person. You can send them the link and have them complete it. Same thing with the participant. You can send the link. You can have them complete it on a computer right at the meeting, or you can print off the PDF and have them fill it out in paper, and then you enter it in the computer later. Okay, so that's the assessments. Thank you so much. Hope that was helpful.